Hi class, Professor Fernandez here. I just completed grading weekly analysis post for post number 2, and a lot of you did really well. In fact, I reached out to a couple of you regarding wanting to use your video post as an example, and I appreciate you letting me know that you would like that. I'm actually going to link to only one post. This person did really well. They actually got 100 on the weekly analysis post. I'd like you to look at it and you can kind of see exactly what I was looking for. But I want to talk about the prompt real quick and make sure we're on the same page. First things first, this module we discussed was relating to the early colonial America up to the Proclamation of 1763. I had a lot of videos that were mentioning the Stamp Act, the Boston Tea Party, the Revolution. We haven't gotten to that. It hasn't happened. The time periods don't line up. We'll get to it, and we're going to get to it next week, or the next module. But if you're mentioning all these things, I have a feeling you're going on the internet and looking up generalities, which is not going to cut it in here, right? I want you to focus on what we're talking about only, okay? So I just want to make sure we're aware of the distinction of covering things that haven't happened yet. All right, so the prompt, and I have it right here. The first thing in your video that I was looking for was you right here. Whoops, where did I go? Was discuss. All right. Discuss the characteristics. All right, I'm out of it. Discuss the characteristics of early colonial society and colonial society on the eve of revolution. Okay, so you needed to first say early colonists, and you can give me, not everyone's going to be the same. You can mention things like they came over for freedom of religion. You can mention some characteristics of the Puritans or Pilgrims. You could talk about Virginia and coming over for gold and not finding it, but going to tobacco. And that leads to indentured servants, plantations, and wanting a piece of the pie, wanting their property. And then you could talk about characteristics of later colonists, right? After the 7 Years' War, you can mention, once again, these men are promised in fighting this war, they expect to be rewarded, and then with the proclamation after 1763, the proclamation of 1763, they're gypped out of their land, or they feel like it. That would be perfect. Those are characteristics. Okay, so that in the rubric is the first part, right here. So that's what I was looking for. Fully discuss the causes or characteristics, right? So you gave me some characteristics of early colonists and later colonists. Full 20 points if you did a really good job on that. The second part, interpretation as a historian. So let's look at the prompt. As a historian, interpret, analyze, and here's the question you needed answered. That's, in a nutshell, this is what I was looking for. How and why did American colonial thinking or / feelings change in early colonial society to the period after the 7 Year War, ending in 1763 with that proclamation? That's all I was looking for. Some of the best answers were, and I'm reading one of them here that they said in their video post, is the early colonists were optimistic and excited about coming to a new land. And their feelings changed throughout the time period towards the British after being forced not to move west and serving in the army in the 7 Years' War. That's pretty good, right? They're telling us that the feelings do change towards negative feelings. They kind of mention why. That's all I was looking for, the interpretation. And that's the second part. So if you gave me something along those lines, I would work with it. This is the interpretation of why did Americans' feelings change from early colonies to right after the French Indian War with the proclamation of 1763. Now, based on your interpretation on why did their feelings change, you needed to give me 2 primary sources that supported that. I got a lot of primary sources that were covered in this module, but sometimes the primary source did not really support the interpretation. A lot of people mentioned Journey to Pennsylvania by Middleburger, and they quoted it, which is what I want. I want you to name the source and give me a quote from it, and then use it to support your interpretation. Or gave me American Husbandry, but didn't really tell me why why you're using it in supporting your interpretation of the colonists' changing attitudes. I've had a lot of people use Proclamation of 1763, which is a good source, right? Because it irritates the colonists after the war. And so that actually relates to their changing attitude or their feeling. So that would be a good one. You can use any primary source as long as you use it, mention it, quote it, and then reference it in your interpretation or why it supports that. All right. And then the last 20 points is a reply. You really needed to reply to a fellow student. I was a little bit easier than I will be in the future. I still had a lot of students saying, hey, I liked your post. I like the way you talked about tobacco plantations and workers. No. Hey, I liked your post when you quoted from Nathaniel Bacon in his Declaration of Rights, and he said, blah, blah, blah. I agree with that, and I can see how it changes the attitude. You actually need to be specific with your reply to a fellow student. And when I say be specific on what they said. So you really need to pick a student that actually did a pretty good job and used primary sources in the right way. So just don't pick the first student. Find someone that actually did a pretty good job. So you may have to go through a couple of students to find one that you want to reply to so you can have enough there to reply to. Okay, that's enough. You'll do a lot better on the next post because they're pretty much going to look the same way. It's going to ask you for characteristics of something. It's going to ask you for your interpretation, and there'll be a question that you're going to answer, right, in your interpretation. And then you're going to have two primary sources you need to pull that support your interpretation. Okay, and then you'll reply to a fellow student, and now you're going to do a lot better job. Have a great weekend, Labor Day weekend, social distance, wear your mask, please. And I'll link to that student that did a really good job. And you can take a look at her post and see, she kind of hits all the points and goes in the order that I was talking about. And then it'll give you kind of a guide of what I was looking for. Once again, have a great weekend, and I will see you next week.